So yeah, let me introduce the session. We're looking this afternoon at changing working practices in television. And we have 3 papers, and we take them as always in the order of how they were basically in the program. So we're going to start with Gökçe Baydar Çavdar from Hacettepe University. She will talk to us about Survivor Turkey, but she is a research assistant at the Faculty of Communication, and she received her PhD in 2019 from Ankara University with a thesis focusing on popular religious and spiritual self-help books. Her research interests include everyday life, middle class, and contemporary culture. Over to you. And by the way, I will say 2 minutes when you have 2 minutes left.
Okay, so I will start with sharing my presentation with you. And if it's okay, I will move on. I think
that looks good. Great.
Okay. So I will start with talking about Survivor and why it is relevant in Turkey. TV is still very much relevant in Turkey and a prominent form of media consumption. 2018 research reports that average viewing time is 3 hours, 34 minutes, and 75% of the households have a still TV set and regularly watch TV. And a more recent study reports on the percentage of the regular viewers in the population as 89%. And the show has a strong ability to become an immediate conversation on social media. And Survivor fan activities are one of the top 5 activities of the Turkish Twitter daily flow. And Survivor Turkey is the longest running game documentary in the country, and its popularity and ability to draw record numbers of viewers calls for exploration, and exploration in terms of its production strategies, narrative strategies, its presentations of gender, race, and audience reception. Here I limit myself with discussing the show's transformation in terms of authenticity and claims to the real as in real selves and feelings. So this study might be considered also as something in defense of studying the old television and the old television text, but of course situating this in an age of convergence, recognizing that there is an overflow of the text to other media and activities, and also that the daily lives of the contestants are increasingly becoming a paratext of the show. So let me remind you that this is still a work in progress. Any kind of contribution is appreciated. So a short background on the Turkish media context, and Acun Ilıcalı is of course needed. Acun Ilıcalı is right now one of the hosts and the producer of the show since 2006, and after the acquisition of a mainstream TV channel in 2013, he also became the broadcaster. So he's both the author and the face of Survivor, and his career is an unprecedented one because he started as a sports reporter in the late 90s, and then became a producer of global formats, and then became a broadcaster, and even now referred to as a media mogul. You may be familiar with his name, I'm not quite sure, but he acquired a football team in the UK in January this year. And acquiring the global format Survivor's rights by him, as he states, unorthodox. And since he was the host of Survivor on Show TV in one of the mainstream TV channels, and when Show TV was about to declare bankruptcy, the format owner offered him the rights in 2005, and he acquired the rights and became both the host and the producer on another commercial mainstream channel, Star TV, in 2006. His production company now, Acun Media, is now active in 13 countries as of this year, and mostly in South America, Europe, and producing shows including Survivor, The Voice, Got Talent, Exatlon, which he has the patent on, The Voice Kids, and Come Dine With Me. As he elsewhere suggests, one of the turning points for the enterprise for Acun Media, for the production company, was Survivor. So one episode of Survivor Turkey lasts more or less 4 hours, including commercial breaks, and very much like the Turkish dramas, The Disease. That's what they call the Turkish disease now, as in the Turkish language. And Survivor season lasts for around 96 days in 2020. 150 days in 2021. And although my aim is not to compare with the other localizations, I'm familiar with the US version, being 12 episodes a season, each episode around 40 minutes. And I followed the last season of the US version to have a general idea. And Survivor Turkey is broadcasted 6 days a week and lasted for almost 118 days this year. So they start with two teams, around 15 contestants each, and weekly bootings occur throughout the season. The main characteristic of Survivor Turkey, I should add, that it is not and never has been entirely dead TV in analysis terms. It is because there is at most 2 days between shooting and broadcasting, meaning that the final outcome is not a secret to be kept hidden because no one knows the final outcome beforehand. The time gap between these two, the broadcasting and the shooting, increasingly disappears in the season, and the show becomes live in the finale voting. And the show also consists of personal interviews, eviction councils, and footage from the games and the daily life on the island. And if you are not familiar with the show, a typical episode kind of looks like this. Contestants vote each other for elimination. However, the show applies to SMS voting about which of the elimination candidates will stay on the island. And the voting is applied usually weekly, but it may change during the season. And the voting usually indicates that audience overall affirms and favors a certain contestant with his or her ability in the games, but I suggest more importantly, character and their values. So key to understand the transformation, I first report on the prominent changes of the production in terms of the production scale, which also had effects on the show's narrative over the years. But first one is the eventfulness. With Acun Ilıcalı's production, Survivor became increasingly more eventful through big rewards, and these owe so much to Acun Ilıcalı's, again, growing economic, symbolic, and social capital. Big rewards took place mostly after 2010. Some of them included a New York trip, front row seats to NBA finals, VIP tickets to Beyonce concert, meeting up with Turkish football national team in New Jersey, a luxury car, a house they were given away during the season. So contrasting to the few early quiz shows or domestic context reality shows, Survivor marks also, in the Turkish context, the second generation of reality programming in Misha Kalka's periodization, characterized mainly by a shift to much larger budgets. Second one is the SMS voting, as I mentioned. Beginning from 2011, SMS voting was implemented, which meant further audience involvement in the narrative. And Ilıcalı states frequently that the voting system was unfair, so he wanted the audience, the people, to step in and decide on who will stay on the island and eventually decide on the sole survivor. Third one is the accusation of TV8's TV8 by Acun Medya. TV8 was one of the mainstream channels which had a share of 12, and Ilıcalı reinvented this channel as an entertainment themed channel, shutting down the news department and broadcasting only entertainment reality programs produced by Acun Medya. Ratings and share of TV8's TV8 increased tremendously in the 6 months following the acquisition, and the derivative programs emerged. Survivor Extra is broadcasted live following the Survivor episode, and Survivor Panorama on the weekends. So including these programs and the broad summaries, almost 9 to 10 hours of the daily stream had become about Survivor. It also meant that they generated an ongoing commentary by former contestants who later have become commentators. This contributed to creating an expertise on the show with people whose discursive skills are mostly on and limited to Survivor. So coming back to this, the fourth one is the All-Star seasons. Returning members enhanced the serialization of the show and pursuing the aim of fulfilling the unfinished stories, unresolved disputes between the contestants, and vengeance became staples in the narrative arcs of the show. This is not about only who will be the sole survivor anymore, but the other disputes and unfolding of those stories. So the last 2 points I mentioned, the third and the fourth, also enhanced the enterprise as a closed system. It is because the contestants can move back and forth throughout the years. One can be a contestant, then a commentator, and a contestant again. So ordinary people created a career out of, and thanks to Survivor, became a part of the broadcasting system. Survivor format is classified usually as game documentary in many sources, but the broader term reality TV is operator for my focus, and it calls for a brief revisit to the key discussions on the term. Regarding the production, while producers of reality television, such as Survivor's Mark Burnett, do not claim their shows present natural situations, they contend that what happens in the constructed situations is real. Lidl also makes similar comments when he suggests that this is, after all, entertainment, and justifying the adjustments and the interventions in the constructed reality he made. In contrast to documentary, one can suggest that the reality shows are more about entertaining than informing about the real, since these formats are designed to create dramatic arcs and produce storylines. And regarding the audience, Annette Hill, in her early reception studies, suggests that even if the audience suspect that the display might be staged in reality shows, audience don't give up searching for moments of truth. And Richard Crew, again in an early reception work on Survivor, contends that the relations on Survivor is pretty much real for the audience, supporting Kafka's later argument that the second reality of games in these shows is not a space of make-believe. Crew's findings revealed the show was real, authentic for the audience for these reasons: the lack of a formal script, the cast of non-actors, the honest emotions displayed, and the elements of surprise and unpredictability. What's more, both audience, contestants, and producers contend that the constant surveillance in reality shows will eventually eliminate all the acting or acting up. So these formats usually self-proclaim as themselves as reaching and capturing real emotions. Also, performance is no longer necessarily opposed to authenticity, and many participants treat the camera as a means of self-expression, especially through the personal interviews, transforming the TV from a mass medium to first-person medium. So I suggest that the authenticity claims of a reality show is partly related to the claims of real selves and feelings of non-actors. But as I will suggest later, when we talk of the authenticity of a show, the emerging criteria is not limited to this. So that being said, I aim to account for the changing meanings of the authentic among the contestants and also between the contestants and the audience. Then I will move on to the moments of authenticity crisis on the show. Being open and being themselves as ideals are reproduced by the contestants, and they impose this upon one another. And also, but especially commentators implicitly suggest that also a little drama is expected. Real feelings and real selves must be on display, even if and sometimes because they are intense. So the epitome of this was stated by Acun Ilıcalı on the season finale 2 weeks ago, when he said to a contestant that you did keep your romantic feelings hidden. He was referring to the romantic feelings that he had for another contestant. You did keep your romantic feelings hidden and did not let us see the reality, and this was your biggest mistake in this season. So even though being open is always valued, over time the meanings struggle over what is considered authentic change. The change happened owing much to the emerged pattern regarding the winners and finalists. They were male professional athletes in fighting sports like boxing, kickboxing, especially they were the finalists and the winners between 2013 and 2018. With the audience involvement in the narrative, audience highly supported these rather macho kind of performances, and they were almost they were usually the outcast ones, and the audience found them mostly genuine, sincere, as being themselves and as authentic. These were also the ones that had impressive oratory skills. They may easily sound like, well, especially right-wing politicians utilizing populist sentiments on the real well-deserved success of themselves, and also generating a we other divide, of course, situating themselves on the correct side of the dispute, especially during the councils when they ask for the audience to vote for them. Their frequent statements included things like, I had some quotations here from 2016, 2015, and 17. The others are not men enough. I'm more of a man than all of you are, etc. And although it's difficult to exactly pin down, things slowly changed when other contestants in the following seasons tried to mirror these performances. Being the outcast was considered strategic, well calculated, and fake. And these accusations still resonate with acting or acting up. The 2020 winner, rather, had a whole different performance of self. He was usually more prone to cry and cried on a few occasions over when he missed a certain food reward in an auction, for example. And this was considered more authentic than that the outcast one of that season. And short comments circulated on newspapers on the change of the society and its values, marking this win as the triumph of the more fragile and snowflake Generation Z, assuming a whole new generation is now the voting audience and the society is changing. However, this is more like a general observation I make and on how this was viewed by the media and the audience, and I think it requires more structured methodology, and I'm aware of that. So the second part of this, the second part is the outside reality as paratext. Uh, Prior knowledge on the contestants is now more than ever available, and Hill again states in her early work that the audience don't have a ground to assess if they are being real or faking it. But we now have prior knowledge shaping our perception of their on-screen performances as real or not, and regular viewers of the show, especially the ones using social media regularly, now know that some of them are close friends outside and or was so previous season, and so the audience might expect them to act in accordance with this friendship, being loyal to each other, and etc. So some consistency is also expected from one another among the contestants, or rather prior knowledge shapes their relations. One example is illustrative in this regard. After appearing as a regular commentator, Sema, one of the contestants, comes back for an all-star season as a contestant, and another contestant that year, it was this year, calls out her for being ruthless while commenting the previous year and states that she will not ever trust her because of her comments. In a similar manner, their social relations pursued outside uh, and between the seasons, and the contestants now might base their judgments on eviction regarding their outside disputes. One of them becomes skeptical of the other since he invited everyone to a birthday party except for himself, and openly states that in the show that he was offended by this. So these altogether point to an intensification of the serialization, and that another layer of reality, which is daily life, manifested itself as paratext, which the production had difficulty controlling. This season especially, Acun Ilıcalı and the production team frequently told them to try not to talk about what happened outside because they did not have any control over what happened outside. A new boundary had to be drawn between outside reality and the televisual one, although it was, I think, paradoxical, and I think failed since the production encouraged them to be open and honest about their feelings at all times. So building on this, I'm moving on to the relatively recent discussions on the authenticity of the show. I will discuss the term in 3 points, as you see here: the ordinary people and returning members if ordinary is lost, the conditions of the island, and overall the fairness of the show. Ordinary became contested or lost altogether during the seasons, and YouTube comments especially recently suggest in certain videos, although that the old seasons are the authentic ones, since the last seasons are rather including YouTube influencers or returning contestants who already have a ready fan base. So returning members are aware that they are participating in a major media spectacle, but also, of course, now more experienced on being themselves on TV, on the proper and valued forms of mediated authenticity. Although only one YouTube Instagram celebrity participated in the show, his ready fan base was crucial for his win, giving way to the discussion over the authenticity of the show on this level. A sense of authenticity is lost for a certain audience of the show, and the nostalgia is evident in content generated by fans. So the second point of discussion is on the conditions of the island. Authenticity contract is a useful term referring to a more or less trust between the audience. Referring to more or less trust between the audience and the production about the show's claims. A talent show might present itself as exploring the dense talent among the ordinary and among the non-professionals, when a kept secret of a contestant's professional dance career comes to light, this violates this contract and manifests itself as an authenticity scandal. A similar authenticity crisis emerged in the year 2016 and handled by the production. A contestant was caught on camera, although from far away, that she was smoking, and the production team stated that she found the cigarette on the garbage bins of the camera crew, and they did not approve this kind of behavior. This was brought up by Acun Ilıcalı in an emergency council, that's what they call it, and the contestant apologized. So immediately this became a conversation on social media and the newspapers, and the audience, at least on social media, that we can come across is still skeptical about if the production allows or provides such items or not. The show always had claim to the reality of the conditions, but reinforced by the before-after images functioning as the visual evidence, what they went through is real, especially on a physical level. Such footage acknowledges the visceral effects of intense competition or physical deprivation, but still the hidden damage have to be verbalized, as Bressi and Nunn puts it. They frequently verbalize this pain during the season, and claims to the difficult conditions are also reinstated by the show's inbuilt competition taking place halfway of the show before the merging of the islands, before merging of the two teams, on how much weight they lost, and the biggest loser wins a small prize.
2 minutes.
Okay, I'm wrapping up. And the last example pretty much sums up the other authenticity criticisms, the fairness of the voting system, if the production and the commentators favor a certain contestant or not. A YouTuber social media celebrity who has 1.3 million followers on Twitter generates content online speculating on the show. He claims in his videos that the production intentionally creates a counter character for the audience's favorite and favors particular people on the show through special treatments. Also, they talk in favor of them in the comment shows, eventually affecting the voting audience. How this is handled by the production team, I think, is important, since they guested him on Panorama Live, one of the derivative programs, and answered his claims. The commentators, speaking on behalf of the production, stated that if the commentary they make is only focused on certain contestants, it's not to favor anyone, but because of the screen time that particular contestants make up on the show. They stated that this is more fair and responsible, and also they overall defended the production team and authenticity of the show through Acun Ilıcalı's personal characteristics as genuine, credible, and fair. So finally, maybe I should just, finally I should add that there were some crises regarding the discourse of the commentators. Ilıcalı personally called the live program just to state that a certain commentator is stepping over the line, and they agreed before the show not to talk about a certain subject, which is their private romantic lives of the contestants. This happened 3-4 times over the seasons since 2020, and I suggest that authenticity of the show and its appeal are reinstated through these destabilizing moments, since these moments of crisis function as a transparency act, revealing the behind-the-scenes decisions of the production team. So to conclude, I had to cut large portions out, and I hope it still makes sense. I'm also still working on the accumulation and the functions of Acun Ilıcalı's different kinds of capital, namely social, symbolic, and economic, and within the field of reality entertainment. But we also need more research on fan activities and reception of the survivor. And these are my references. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you so much, Gökçe. Really interesting how production or changes to production have an impact on authenticity, or the construction of authenticity within the program itself. So our next speaker is Dr. Punitha, who will speak to us about production dynamics in South Indian soap operas. So let me just let that person back in.
I think she has to stop sharing.
Oh yeah.
Okay, I just went back and okay.
I might have to, let me see if I can do it here. Can you stop sharing? Is that something that you can still do?
Okay, I'm trying to.
But I might have to actually throw you out and you might have to come back in that way.
Okay, that might work too. Is it okay now?
No, it's still there.
We are still seeing yours.
Okay. Oh.
We
can stop now. It's okay. I will.
Okay. I'll try that. Ha! That looks good. So you should now be able to share, Punitha. So yes, she will talk to us about production practices in Indian soap operas. She is the head and associate professor of the postgraduate department of communication at the Women's Christian College in Chennai. Let me just get people back in. Someone else has done that. Thank you. Yeah, we can see your screen. Yeah. She has 23 years of teaching experience as well as 3 years of industry experience. Her doctoral thesis is on the political economy of entertainment television. She has been part of the Curriculum Revisions Committee of Journalism and Communication and has been nominated by the University of Madras. She is a member of the Board of Studies in various colleges of the city and has published chapters in books and presented papers at national and international seminars and conferences, including, obviously, today. So over to you, Punitha.
Thank you. So this is an extension of my doctoral research. I spoke exclusively for this paper to those of them whom I had met earlier. So to begin with, the cultural production shares many fundamental features with other production processes. And many studies have undertaken to unravel the meanings that cultural products represent. But not many researchers have taken upon themselves the task of probing the conditions of production in the media industry and the television industry in particular. So it becomes necessary that a study which is focusing on television production, it has to obtain certain similarities and dissimilarities between cultural production and production in general. While it's important not to overstate the difference that cultural products represent, its distinctive feature should not be lost sight of. When you talk about, for this, I have applied a political economy schools, one of the most leading theorists, Nicholas Garnham, where he points out the distinctive features of cultural industries. He talks about entertainment capitalism is marked by the conflicting forces of profit maximization and scarcity creation. So this contradiction is rooted in the manner in which cultural goods are consumed. So the product development of cultural industries is no different from other industries. Each cultural product is required to exhibit novelty that makes their development more intensive and expensive than other industrial goods. So the initial development of the product is also more expensive than its reproduction. So, however, but the public good nature of the cultural product means that they are not used up by consumption. By restricting access either through controlling the distribution or relying on the regulatory measures like privacy laws, organizations ensure scarcity and in turn profits. So moreover, cultural goods again are not consumed by, to acquire and exhibit cultural development. So individual cultural products would not be favored by consumers for a longer period of time. And but a brief account of the striking or distinctive feature of cultural industry should not obtain us from positing the industry in the larger economy and keeping it away from its dynamics. So these are the objectives of my paper. The objective is to study and understand the production process of Tamil serialized fiction. This is one of South India's most popular language. I'll come back to that later. Which is undertaken by the independent producers. So the production process of independent producers, which is mediated by broadcasters, advertising agencies, and by the rating agencies. So the production process is studied taking into the dynamics of institutions that are direct influence on production process, including the creative process. So television sector, again, when you look at television sector, South India's, it's a key to India's creative economy. It is still the cheapest form of entertainment and the widest form of entertainment across genres. Television continues to occupy almost 45% of South India's media and entertainment market share. And I mean, my industry reports predict that by 2022, the South Indian market will be almost 33,100 crores with the 10% growth rate. So, and subscription continues to be the main revenue for these channels, and advertising following next. And South India is also home to 179 of India's 613 television channels, and which account for 35% of the country's total viewership. So when you look at it, the Tamil language channels have almost 65 channels. That is again topping the list in South India, which is followed by the other regional languages like Telugu, Kannada, and Malayalam. And also the market size is phenomenal. It's like 36,000 crore. It was in 36,000 crore in 2019, and it dropped to 29,000 crore in 2020 because of the pandemic. But again, recovered again, in 2021, and right now it's continuing to grow. So that is the status of the South Indian market. So coming back to Tamil television industries, the soap operas are the mainstay of Tamil entertainment television. So the general entertainment channels, they attract a large number of eyeballs, as well as account for the biggest share of revenues. For the general entertainment channels, serialized fiction or soap operas are the main source of income. They are the most important genre. Yet the production is undertaken by independent producers. Not the broadcasters don't have their own production setup, especially for soap operas. They have the production setup for the game shows or any other for news and other things, but not for soap operas. Everything is mostly outsourced. And so this task falls upon the independent producers to produce them. So it's almost all of them are commission programs. So for mapping these production conditions in Tamil television, which was, there are so many levels of undertaking which has to be looked at to look into the Tamil. I'm not getting into it because of the lack of time. So it is a macro environment where you talk about what globalization and liberalization, did. It was in the 90s, it opened up, and what happened, all our major experiments. I'm not getting into all that. And I'm going to focus only on the industrial context of Tamil television. So basically, I had interviewed, independent producers and also the channel managers. This is the Tamil television. It's one of the largest regional television market in India, and the market is dominated definitely by private satellite channels. So the public broadcaster, which is the Doordarshan, has a very, very, very marginal presence. The Sun TV again is one of those leading channel in the Tamil television markets. Surprisingly, again, if you have you look at it, you have this is the latest report of the Broadcasting Audience Research Council, which is BAC, which is the only reliable, only agency, the rating agency, which almost all the broadcasters have subscribed to. So there, even here, you see, you have, in spite of being a regional sector, Sun TV is topping the overall things, and then it's followed by the other Hindi channels. This is just to have a look at the serials which are the mainstay, which are the popular ones on these channels. And again, these are the top 10 soaps which is produced. Yeah. So the research context, when you're talking about the research context, television texts, including soaps, have a major focus of inquiry within the media studies. The audiences, reception and reception contest have also received much attention. Most of the studies, which as far as Tamil television, which I have known, is done on audience reception. So in comparison, there are very, very few studies which have been done on production process. One, it's very difficult because to get the information from them, because when I did it, I had to, cross-check, verify with them, and then look at what the market is and what they are saying, and then come to a logical conclusion. Because what they say sometimes, the channel which they might not come up with what is happening inside the industry as such. So I visited a lot of shows and also the production companies, and so yeah. Then moving on to the questions which I address is what is the role of, because soaps are considered as a women's genre, it's considered as a women's form. So what role does these play in the industrial production context? That is one thing I wanted to study, and also how why is still what is the role of independent production houses? And do independent production houses, whether they are flexible, or to what extent they are given freedom by the broadcasters, by the channels themselves, and how creativity is sustained and managed in such a industrial production process. These are the things which I wanted to look at, and the relationship between the consumer power and the soap opera production. So I did in-depth interviews with in-depth interviews with channel manager, independent producers, creative personnel, and media buyers. So this is what I'm going to talk about. The Tamil television industry is basically, as I said earlier, it's a large regional market. So commercial satellite television dominate the market. And as people like to watch the original Tamil programs, neither English nor Hindi programs attract much viewership. So as a result, the rest of the country, mostly Hindi is, a lot of them watch Hindi serials, but not Tamil Nadu. Tamil Nadu still prefers its own regional language. So you have the local channels face no threat from outside. However, the industry is dominated by one particular channel. That's what we saw on the list top, the Sun TV. That group dominates the last mile connectivity also, namely the cable and the satellite home, cable connections also. They are now into dish and other, but still they control the entire setup. So in terms of advertisement revenues also, Tamil television market ranks the first among the regional market. So they also end up getting the considerable advertising revenue. Then production houses, there are various production houses which produce programs for these channels. And the creative process are carried out by the independent production houses, and the personnel are employed by the producers, and the production houses are either commissioned or they make by hiring slot. This is still the trend here. And one thing about Tamil television channels is the politics and Tamil channels are very, very interrelated. You have two major political parties, the DMK and the Anna Dravida Muneta Kalagam. They are two major ADMK. They are, in short, they are called. So the two main political parties. The two main political parties have associations with the television channels. You have a Sun Network with DMK and Jaya TV with the ADMK. So whichever government, there's a tendency in Tamil Nadu is the government, usually they come this time, 5 years this government, and the next 5 years this government. So wherever the government comes in power, they tend to have or make laws that will affect them other party. It's like that. So the Sun TV expanded its cable network only with the clout which had only with its political clout. So this was the scenario, and that helped them develop into such a large group now, which has been listed in the Bombay Stock Exchange also. And so they broadcast soaps from 10:30 a.m. to 11 p.m. And there are other genres also like movies and news, but then the considerable amount of viewing time is for only soaps, and then that's the peak between 8 to 9 p.m. And as far as television soaps, before television soaps became popular, the main audience, soaps main audience is still the same. It's women viewers, because considering the time that women, most of them are housewives here, and they have this period when the children go to school and then till they come back, so they have a longer period of time, so they are addressed. So usually it was the one of the script writers says that it was the family films which all the serialized fiction and magazines which were the target for women, but now there was a decline in family films because of television, and which is continuing. Now it's become more of a family audience. Even men join in later, and then evening it's kids join in. So if you see the slot in the evening, it has kids as the main role. In most of the serials have kids playing the lead role or very important role. So that is the scenario here. And so yeah, unlike the literary writer, the television writer or the director is more aware of the market dynamics of the medium. By the nature of the medium, television requires the combined effects of many creative personnel. Even though serialized fiction involves what is called imaginative or creative, the rules are not fundamentally different. The soap opera as it is, it's a televisual format. So typically it spans about hundreds of episodes. The successful episodes are no longer so successful soap, but then it is determined by the story, and that is producers set to tell. Sometimes they can stop halfway, because they think if the rating is sliding. So it all falls back to the ratings, which every Thursday, one of these channel managers said, it all falls back to the ratings. Every Thursday when we get a rating, you show, and this is what it looks like. And then once they find that the rating is continuously slumping, either the production house is changed or the serial is completely stopped, and they asked to do another pilot, and then it goes on like that. So there is no mercy. Absolutely, it's cutthroat competition. They just stop immediately. That again, it affects the star cast. If suppose they don't know what is the reason for the slumps, why it is falling, then they'll change the lead character like the world over, or the director. So they adopt all tactics, but then they are very merciless as far as dropping a soap is concerned. Yeah. So the still the as world over, it's like women, it's either the silent sufferer, okay, or the saint. That is still the predominant theme of most of the soaps. And nuclear families and their problems rarely find place in Tamil soaps. Though nuclear families no longer exist. India is known for nuclear joint families. But still it's changing. It's changed a lot. You find a lot of nuclear families, especially in the cities. But that is not shown in any of these soaps. If you look at it, it's all joint family. It's not nuclear family because one simple reason is it doesn't, doesn't give them the scope for experimenting, scope for introducing so many other characters. So the nuclear families don't feature at all in Tamil soap. So this is the yardstick. Apart from the lead character, the other prominent characters also should interest the audience. It goes to such an extent that see in films you have the storytelling where the storytelling plays a central part. Given the fact that soaps happen in a domestic environment and revolves around a set of characters, there is no escape from the familial conflicts. So that when the narrative deals with intense emotion but also seeks dramatic outcomes, so it becomes necessary that the story has to be told through dialogues. This is what dialogues. Hence, the dialogues are very, very important. And every new serial experiment goes with a popularity test. That is like, the thumb rule within the industry is that 5 episodes to register the story to the audience. And after that, 20 episodes, the production team to gauge whether the serial is a success or not. So due care is taken in formatting the initial episodes, particularly the first week. So there could be an early set of watchers, another set of viewers who join the serial after a week. So that they consider as a very, very important thing. And so all these conversation now, what is the changing trend is now the channels control completely, because this is one of the major revenue source. They control completely, and then even the every week, even they have them weekly meetings. They ask them to present, how is it going to be, including the casting. Everything plays a major role. The trend here is to have, the lead character will be a woman who's a heroine who's lost her, the market in the films and then moves in. Here it is not like, West, where they can act in television and films at the same time. Once you don't have a market in films, only you move to soaps. That is the trend here.
2 minutes.
How many minutes?
2 minutes, please.
Okay, fine. So, yeah, to wind up, there are a lot of, I mean, it's a lot of things which are happening to the larger extent, but one thing I want to emphasize is though soaps is considered as a medium which is targeting women, there are hardly any female writers. They think that the producers think that it is not, an apt medium for women because the voluminous amount of writing that involves, because you need to have every day and so many number of episodes and so many number of scenes. They think women can't do, because only one woman is serially working and others come and go. None of them are staying, especially for the serial writing. That is one point. Another point what I want to talk about is how it is done as an industry. It's like, where one particular scriptwriter has some 10, 15 people with him, young employees, and then they all writing with pen and paper, not with even a system. So this is happening. Another aspect is, again, lack of one, even though there's a woman genre, lack of women are there employed behind the scenes. Only they are there only as a cast. That is one of the things. So the division of labor, when you talk about the division of labor, it is again, even like films, they have an established union and other things. Here they are made to work long hours and with less pay. And it's a whims and fancies of the independent producers, because the independent producers themselves are at the mercy of the broadcasters. Again, in films, at least you have earlier. I mean, now everything is digital. At least they used to go and stop go to the lab and stop them if there's lack of payment. So that is not done here. Now there is no chance of getting the money back also. So there is no strong union. Again, it's changing. They're trying to get into something of an organized. Another changing trend is whether if they don't, they'll take off. That is still continuing. That is one thing. So again, these are the few pointers. One is, again, that everything is dependent on the ratings, and that even the ratings itself is not free of politics, because all of them say that the market player tends to control by controlling the peopleometers where it is kept, finding them, and and then asking them to watch that particular channel. So all these things are there, but then everybody has raised concern. The other channels have raised concern, but none of them are willing to really experiment. But as far as the rating is concerned, this is the only option available, so they are all going with it. That's it.
Great, thank you, Punitha. Okay, our final speakers are Betsy Walters and Laura Brown. They have just been officially named as PhD candidates. They will talk to us about the Oscar Telecast. And let me just read their biographies quickly. So Laura is a PhD candidate at the University of Texas of Austin at the Department of Radio, Television and Film. She earned her MFA in Film and Television Studies and a BA in History, both from Boston University. Her research interests include American broadcast media history, critical industry studies, music on television, and media failures. So, always an interesting topic, I have to say. Laura is currently the co-managing editor of Flow, serves on the editorial board of the Velvet Light Trap, and holds a position on the Graduate Student Council of the Library of Congress Radio Preservation Task Force. Betsy is a PhD candidate at American and New England Studies program at Boston University. So she's writing a PhD on the Oscar Telecast, where she also earned her MFA in Film and Television Studies. Her research considers how the film and television industry constructs and perpetuates ideas of prestige and artistry through spaces like awards and film festivals. Before graduate school, she worked in the film festival industry, and she's currently sitting on the board of the Marvin Hamlish International Music Awards. Over to you two. We can see it beautifully.
Oh, great. Okay. In 2021, the COVID-19 pandemic forced the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences and the ABC Television Network to radically rethink their annual Oscar telecast. With travel rendered impossible, the show had to transcend its usual Hollywood confines incorporating mostly live segments of nominees, award introductions, and acceptance speeches from around the world. The Academy situated this ceremony as both a COVID-necessitated outlier and an opportunity for reinvigoration, noting in a press release that the ceremony was, quote, the perfect occasion for innovation and for re-envisioning the possibilities for the award show, end quote. Yet what seemed like an anomalous experiment was in fact a return to the telecast's roots. In 1953, the first Oscar telecast switched between simultaneous ceremonies in Hollywood and New York City, a format that both allowed Broadway-based nominees to participate in the ceremony traditionally based in Los Angeles and underscored the power of the young medium of television to collapse geographical boundaries through a live telecast. The bicoastal telecast continued until 1958, when the Academy consolidated it into one ceremony held in the Los Angeles area, the format that would largely become the blueprint for Oscar telecasts for the next 6 decades. In this presentation, we historicize the seemingly anomalous 2021 Oscar telecast by putting it into conversation with the bicoastal Oscar telecasts of the 1950s. By emphasizing the Oscar telecasts as our site of study through an analysis of historical and contemporary trade publications and ceremony footage, we interrogate the supposed novelty of the 2021 ceremony's format and complicate producers' claims that the ceremony was not going to be like anything that's been done before. Through this case study, we make a larger argument that artifacts situated as outliers, whether by necessity, promotion, or both, repeatedly have historical precedents that often go overlooked. Furthermore, our research emphasizes that the Oscars must be studied as television, as both the 1953 and 2021 ceremonies needed the liveness and simultaneity of television to fully realize their celebration of cinema. Our framework conceptualizes the Oscar telecast within both an industrial and a cultural context. We join previous Oscar scholarship in considering the telecast within Diane and Katz's theory of live media events, what they describe as high holidays of mass communication, in which live television serves to transfigure events in a way that unifies a national or sometimes global audience. While Diane and Katz foreground state events, such as Queen Elizabeth II's coronation, a special event to which the early Oscar telecast was deemed analogous by the trade television, we argue that the Oscars serve a similar cultural role, primarily for American viewers, but also to a global audience of both casual and ardent cinema fans. Additionally, we situate the Oscar telecast within John Caldwell's framework of deep texts and rituals, or the ways in which the film industry self-theorizes and cultivates a unique culture unto itself. The Oscars were first presented in 1929 by the nascent Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences as a way for the American film industry to celebrate and promote its own work. By 1930, the Oscars were broadcast, first locally, then nationally in 1944, with the national broadcast enabling the Oscars to become what Caldwell describes as a, quote, publicly disclosed deep text or a professional exchange for explicit public consumption, end quote. Industry trade publications are also deep texts within Caldwell's framework and provide a fruitful site through which the details of the Oscar telecasts are mediated by and for the industry. As Eric Hoyt demonstrates, trades have also been in tension with the industry, serving simultaneously as industry gatekeepers, promoters, critics, and sites of negotiation for conflicting industrial sectors. By utilizing industry trades in our analysis, we foreground how the film and television industries conceptualize the telecast and the tensions that arise between the two. Finally, in our conclusion, we consider the evolving role of the trades in a modern era in which, thanks to the internet, trades are less self-isolated within the industry and accessible to a much broader audience.
So, as Betsy had mentioned, the Oscars were nationally broadcast in the United States via radio starting in 1944, which was standard practice until the early 1950s. However, in January of 1953, just 2 months before the 25th Annual Academy Awards presentation that was scheduled for March, Variety reported that Universal Pictures, Warner Brothers, and Columbia Pictures had decided to pull their financial support from the Oscars. And this meant that the financial future, and therefore the glamorous presentation of the Oscars, was put into a brief moment of panic. But the Board of Governors assured the Academy's determination to go ahead with the show, citing a, quote, obligation to the industry, the Academy members, exhibitors, and fans to keep the award of awards alive. In order for the film industry to keep one of its hallmarks alive, it turned to its biggest media competitor, television. And after just 2 to 3 weeks, Variety reported again that NBC was set to telecast the Oscars. While the broadcast networks were the ones to swoop in and provide financing so that the Academy Award presentations could still continue in its usual pomp and circumstance fashion, I do want to point out that the theater television network, which was a relatively failed flash in the pan endeavor that transmitted programming not into one's home, but actually onto screens in movie theaters, had their bid rejected by the Academy because they instead favored more traditional broadcast television. And the Academy reportedly entertained the theater television network's bid to telecast the Oscars, but turned it down because they believed the future of the ceremony would stand a better chance because of the financial support that could be supplied by the broadcast television networks and, more importantly, the broadcast television network sponsors. But nevertheless, the Academy struck a deal for RCA to foot the $250,000 bill to broadcast the 25th Academy Awards via radio and television on the NBC network. In the weeks leading up to the ceremony, Variety reported that the Oscars would be formatted for television, which they postulated as to, quote, permit for maximum dramatic values, including pickups to capture the excitement and color of the ceremony. But the most notable for the purposes of this presentation is that the awards would be presented in a bi-coastal fashion. So in addition to the traditional Academy Awards ceremony in the Pantages Theater in Hollywood, there would also be an additional location in New York City housed at an NBC studio where awards would be handed out to nominees who were on the East Coast. On the night of the telecast, MC Bob Hope opened the ceremony with a monologue chock full of television-related jokes. He called the Oscars Hollywood's most exciting giveaway show, and he said that the evening, quote, is indeed a wedding of two great entertainment mediums with the motion pictures and television. While it's true that Oscar has a child bride, it's a comfort to know that the kid is loaded. In fact, the bride's father is picking up the tab for this wedding reception. The whole monologue is on YouTube. Highly recommend it. It's quite fun if you can stand Bob Hope. I know a lot of people can't. But after the monologue, the show cuts to New York City, where Academy co-founder Conrad Nagel and actor Frederick March were on hand to dole out awards to nominees in a rather scant-looking set at the NBC International Theater. Nagel makes note that they received a wire from the director and producer of the ceremony, Johnny Green, who had urged the New York segments to be kept as brief as possible, with Frederick March also noting that they hoped sincerely they had one or two winners in the East before cutting back to Hollywood. And approximately halfway through the ceremony, the show cuts back to New York, where the local hosts make note that all the nominees and possible winners had finally arrived, many of whom were actually late to the ceremony because they were wrapping up their performances on the Broadway stage. The most notable cut to New York of the evening, perhaps, was when Shirley Booth took the stage to accept her Best Actress award for her performance in Come Back Little Sheba. The bicoastal Oscar ceremony would continue for another 4 years. And from what I've been able to piece together from the limited clips that have been posted online and from reviews that I found in historical magazines, each ceremony would cut across the country after the opening monologue in Hollywood, with the New York MC being introduced to the sounds of Rodgers and Hart's Manhattan, played as entry music. The East Coast MC would then typically send some greetings. They would make some jokes about New York City, about rainy weather or delis or things of that nature, and would introduce the room before passing the baton back to the West Coast. And the ways in which the East Coast feeds were integrated into the telecast somewhat changed from year to year, implying some forms of experimentation. The second bicoastal telecast in 1954 had Hollywood MC Donald O'Connor and returning New York MC Frederick March awkwardly positioning themselves to face one another to have a little bit of cross-country banter, while the 1955 telecast included Eva Marie Saint's acceptance of her Best Supporting Actress award in New York being projected onto a large screen in Hollywood. The 1956 ceremony saw host Jerry Lewis in Los Angeles and Claudette Colbert in New York exchanging pleasantries, again with Colbert being sort of beamed onto a sort of a large screen behind the Hollywood stage. And my personal favorite moment was in the final bicoastal telecast, where Jerry Lewis and Celeste Holm attempt to kiss one another from 3,000 miles apart. But it was actually after this telecast, however, that Variety's review of the ceremony noted, quote, for the very little she had to do, the telegenic Miss Holm could have telephoned her stuff over. calling into question the necessity of the bi-coastal nature of the ceremony. In September of 1957, Variety reported that after a series of meetings between the Academy, the Motion Picture Association of America, and film studio executives, it was decided that the American film industry would sponsor the 1958 Academy Awards. And this meant that the ceremony would be broadcast on radio and television without additional outside commercials. And instead, the industry would be more focused on promoting itself as a whole. And this change in command also resulted in the Oscars no longer being a bi-coastal event, thus firmly centering the Oscars as a Hollywood-based event. And the exclusion of the New York aspect of the evening goes relatively unmentioned in both the trade magazines as well as the ceremony itself, with the 1958 ceremony opening with a statement by the Academy's president, George Seaton, who had instead placed more emphasis on the Oscars being positioned as public service that would not be interrupted by commercials, which was met by thunderous applause in the theater.
Clearly, the ad-free public service format did not last for very long. 2021 marked the 93rd presentation of the Academy Awards, and with nearly 70 of them televised, the Oscars telecast format was now familiar, if not immutable. While the ceremony had occasionally experienced disruptions or tweaks, nothing had threatened the telecast like the COVID-19 pandemic. Trades breathlessly speculated on what the 2021 show might look like, or if it would be held at all. Though just as it had in 1953, the Academy again promised that the show would go on. On December 8th, 2020, the Academy announced a producing team of Jesse Collins, Stacey Sher, and Steven Soderbergh for a ceremony to be held in late April. The Academy optimistically argued that the necessary accommodations to the pandemic provided the opportunity to experiment and reinvent the telecast. As the producers argued, the show would be unlike anything that had ever been tried. Though he was one of three producers, Soderbergh was positioned as the creative visionary whose manifesto would shape the 93rd Academy Awards, not least because, as the director of the film Contagion, Soderbergh was seen as the on-site expert in terms of pandemic response. I wish I was kidding, but that was genuinely invoked several times. The trades began to filter the producer's vision for an overhauled Oscars, including a more intimate setting in LA's newly renovated Union Station. Most of all, Soderbergh, Collins, and Sher emphasized that the telecast would be a cinematic exercise, a celebration of movies that would be a movie unto itself, even utilizing a widescreen 24 frame per second frame rate to achieve the desired look. I want the whole thing to announce itself out of the gate as different, Soderbergh said, and the opening did just that. Instead of a traditional host's monologue, the show began with a long tracking shot following Oscar-winning actress Regina King as she strutted through the terminal and onto the Oscar stage, film-style credits appearing on the screen, starring each presenter. Think of this as a movie set, she would tell the audience at home, both to establish the show's cinematic credentials and to assure them that guests were following the industry's rigorous safety protocols. Yet TV would inadvertently announce itself. Settling on stage, King tripped and then quickly caught herself, joking, "Live TV, here we go," a precursor to the night's other live surprises. One crucial element was the elimination of the Zoom feeds by which nominees and winners had appeared at the Emmys and Golden Globes. It's the Academy Awards, Soderbergh said. We all want it to be special, and that doesn't feel special. Instead, to ensure consistency and formality, producers incorporated 9 discrete satellite feeds into the telecast, several of which featured nominees stationed in front of landmarks such as the Sydney Harbour Bridge or the glittering lights of Paris, where it was the middle of the night. Several nominated and winning teams were split between locations. In 2 cases, one winner accepted the Oscar, while a co-winner waved happily yet silently on a separate feed. Unlike the lightly adorned New York soundstage from the 1953 Oscars, the ceremony made use of movie theaters as secondary settings. The most frequently incorporated feed showed London's British Film Institute, from which several nominees appeared. A feed from the Dolby Cinema in Seoul, South Korea, featured the evening's most notable remote presentation, in which the previous year's Best Director winner, Bong Joon-ho, announced Chloe Zhao accepting in Los Angeles as that year's recipient. Overall, roughly half of the categories would feature at least one nominee patched in from a remote location. Soderbergh framed this as a way to celebrate the global nature of the film industry, noting, "We want to dispel this myth that LA and New York are where everybody in the entertainment industry come from." Yet the ceremony also emphasized that this global industry unified by satellite was merely a necessary detour on the road back to Hollywood. Before presenting the Jean Hersholt Humanitarian Award, actor Bryan Cranston stood in the empty, cavernous Dolby Theater in Hollywood, the usual home of the ceremony, and solemnly promised that they would be back next year. The producers' determination to upend the Oscar template would ultimately open the show to critique. The telecast ended with a chaotic whimper as the final award, Best Actor, traditionally given before the Best Picture prize, was unexpectedly presented not to the late Chadwick Boseman, whose wife was in attendance, but to Anthony Hopkins, who was sound asleep in the UK. The producers were simultaneously blamed both for their inflexibility in banning Zoom feeds, which might have facilitated the Hopkins speech, and their experimental approach to a tried and tested ceremonial order. Soderbergh punted the criticism back towards the Academy by saying, "You have to understand the show was very much viewed by us and by the Academy as an opportunity to try some really different stuff. And the understanding was always there are going to be some things that work and some things that don't. Things that people like, things that people don't. That's the point. So the goal was to really do something different and let the Academy sift through the response and decide what they would do going forward." Following the lowest rated broadcast in history, the Academy's response was a predictable reversion to the mean. The 94th Academy Awards returns to a slightly reconfigured Dolby Theater on March 27, 2022, without the previous year's COVID accommodations. In what the show's new producer, Will Packer, called an attempt to make the show more TV friendly, it was announced that 8 categories would not be presented as part of the live show, causing a fresh controversy. And of course, the now infamous slap would dominate the post-show discourse. But the ceremony had once again made Hollywood the center of the film world, even as the Academy grappled with ways to maintain the Oscars' relevance and to keep ABC satisfied amid reports that declining viewership was souring the relationship between the Academy and its broadcasting partner.
So we acknowledge that this project is in a pretty nascent stage, but we've still located some initial parallels. And first, we want to point out the ways in which our case studies were reported in trade industry publications vastly differed. And whereas the bi-coastal element of the initial Oscar telecast were reported in the trades in a rather matter-of-fact way, just sort of making note of the fact that there would be cuts to New York for pretty utilitarian purposes, the contemporary trades sort of acted as a mouthpiece for, quite frankly, self-important Oscar producers who were patting themselves on the back for introducing this global element and ended up reiterating their claims of reinvention without contextualizing that simultaneous feeds had been used before. And in our initial research, we've also located moments in which the Oscar ceremony is discussed as being reformatted for television, yet the ceremonies that most needed television worked hardest to forefront Hollywood and the American film industry. The 2021 Oscars were posited as being cinematic, like you're watching a movie, but they needed television's liveness and simultaneity far more than previous ceremonies. In the 1953 Oscars did make mention about the television industry bankrolling the ceremony, but was done so in a very tongue-in-cheek way, as the host Bob Hope was wont to do. But these shows literally could not have gone on without television, a medium that the film industry has made a platform and a pattern of painting as being commercially motivated, while they position themselves as being more artistically significant, although we all know those are very faulty generalizations. And lastly, we just note that these were moments of experimentation. The first, it was because the Oscar telecast was because of financial circumstances, and the latter because it was a moment when the Oscar telecast had to be rethought because of global and financial circumstances. But as the COVID Oscars demonstrated, there are only so many ways to experiment with the format, and many of these innovations were tried right out of the gate. And with our initial location of the Oscars and television being so intertwined, we want to work to further investigate how the Oscars can be considered a televisual product and reacquaint ourselves with questions of what televisuality even means in the first place. And we also want to work to further interrogate the evolving roles of trades within Caldwell's deep text framework. And trades now break Oscar news on publicly accessible websites, making them available not just to industry members, but to the Oscar fandom and anyone with a casual interest. And this shift has also changed how news about the ceremony is reported, and we intend to further compare the two eras while considering where or how these trade reports fit as deep texts and how engagement with the Oscar ceremony has shifted as a result. And we also want to incorporate more archival research to investigate the behind-the-scenes developments through the records of broadcast networks, the Academy, and advertising agencies. For example, Variety reported in 1955 that the initial agreement to telecast the Oscars was formed at a dinner party in Beverly Hills. So we know there are more interesting stories behind the 1950s broadcast than the sort of matter-of-fact trade reports suggest. And as Eric Hoyt demonstrates, the industry trades are ultimately mediators of this information, and we want to investigate the root sources. So, oh, thank you. So to conclude, we believe that our project sort of emphasizes the significance of historicizing supposed outliers and the ways in which they are discursively positioned as outliers. And it's important to contextualize not just events, but also where the information about them comes from. So thank you very much for your time. And Betsy and I both look forward to hearing your thoughts as we develop this project further.
Thank you very much, both of you. Being even a bit faster than needed to be, brilliant, always good. So I'm opening the floor to any questions. Feel free to type them in the chat or to raise your hand, whatever is easiest. I'm really struck by this focus on you know, to some extent taking down the industry discourse of innovation that you highlighted, Betsy and Laura, and I think that's obviously it's an industry discourse that is very, very prevalent in America in particular, I think. But I was wondering to some extent how that might also be true for, you know, the Tamil industry, the Tamil soap industry, and for actually Survivor in Turkey in terms of changes. So how much of a change is this actually in terms of production processes? Because, you know, with the Survivor format, what struck me is that's like sports broadcasting, where former footballers suddenly become pundits. And similarly, you know, the Tamil industry might be a little bit different from the Hindu industry, but actually is it so much different, particularly as far as, you know, the fact that there's so few women behind the camera is concerned?
It is different. Hindi, there are many women. So it's Tamil, it's definitely not so, because even in Hindi film industry, there are many women behind the scenes. So, but not so here. Even at one point, we did a study about the photographers in the newspapers in Chennai. Chennai is the capital of Tamil Nadu. Even here, even then, at that point, not even one was there. Let's say a few years back. Of course, there are now, because there are people who come and then they leave. So it's very difficult for them to sustain here. It's definitely Hindi is far better in terms of production values. Again, everything is almost, it's because bigger budget, and they look at the national audience, a larger scale. So it's definitely better. Here, it's all, they operate within that constraint, because they understood, okay, this is what, they have to cut the cost if they have to make profit. So they're looking at it inward. So where can they cut the cost? And it goes back there. So the producers or the channels, they are aware of where they're cutting, and then they're squeezing them. So when it becomes like that, you can't employ the best talent in the industry. So, and it's very difficult to sustain. So that is one of the issues here.
Gotcha. Do you want to say anything about Survivor and how it kind of, you know, that kind of continuation of the sports program in a way, the footballer becoming the pundit, the former participant becoming the pundit?
Yeah, of course. I think it's a closed system, as I mentioned before, and football is a very privileged form of popular culture in Turkey. It's the most followed and the most fans have as a the footballers have the most fans in Turkey. And what really struck me in the change of the production is also that how much this is available through Acun Ilıcalı's own social network and social capital as well, because the one I mentioned and the one I mentioned, the before after images, the guy that was the very famous footballer, and he decided to participate in the Survivor just because Acun Ilıcalı asked him to. So did this become a habit in the show, and former footballers became participants in the show, and which had they had this peak of their career in early 2000s, and they are now Survivor contestants and physically active in this games, and also you know, recovering their fans, and they're fall from the proper celebrity, that they're not a proper celebrity, but try to recover from that and become relevant again in the popular culture. So I think it's really, you know, strange. I did not have seen anything like that in other media forms, anything like that in Turkey or in an international example. If there is anything like that, please let me know that this is true, that the survivor is becoming, you know, identified with Acun Ilıcalı himself just because of these back and forth, going back and, you know, becoming a contestant and becoming a commentator, and also the popular ones, popular ex-celebrities coming in the show and participating. I think it's amazing kind of how he pursues this, how he is making this available. That's I can add, I think, yeah.
I'm also just struck by how much of an event this is. I mean, you're talking about it dominating so much of the schedule. You know, to show my cards a little bit, I'm currently watching the UK season of Love Island, and the fact that there's like 6 episodes a week is exhausting to me. And the fact that it really is this long, sustained moment in the television schedule is just, I just can't fathom. I'm exhausted watching an hour of Love Island a day, but that's also because they're exhausting people. But I think that it's just, I'm just really struck by that, and I'm wondering if you could sort of talk a little bit more about sort of just the event of it all, because it's just so fascinating to me.
Well, it is to me too, because also I should add that during the pandemic season, they almost had broadcast 7 days a week, like every day, and it's well, they usually say that it's too much pressure on the production team and the editing team, and they have some lack of control over what is being broadcasted, and some you know, sort of over the line commentaries just makes way in the show, makes the cut. And because they in the derivative shows where they comment on the reality moments, he should have done that and this, and they comment on their private lives also sometimes, and it's so I think it's these moments of crisis also makes it paradoxically live and real and authentic for this, for something is going on and something is out there, still out there, and they are talking about their own crisis. And Ilıcalı calls himself, as I mentioned in the presentation, and says, you should not talk about this. We agreed not to talk about this. Why are you talking about this? And he calls the moderator from his cell phone. So it's very intimate, very familiar, a lot of moments of crisis happen, but somehow it reclaims this kind of authenticity, another kind of authenticity of the production team themselves, and Acun Ilıcalı himself. So I think it's exhausting too, by the way, and also especially the prior seasons where the macho ones were just audience's favorite. It was all like a torture when you try to become a part of this as a regular viewer, because you watch and there's nothing else going on TV, and you just come across that, and you kind of, you know, maybe it's, I don't know if it's for you as well, if it works like this, but you become a part of this and try to see what will unfold next. So it is exhausting, and I just cannot stop turning TV off. I don't consider myself as a scholar fandom or a fandom, but I'm a regular viewer, which is really weird because almost no one in communication sciences departments, communication faculties watch TV around me. This is so weird for me. This is so strange for me. And when I talk about this, and they just tell me that this is exhausting. This is just trash TV, and you're wasting so much time on this. But somehow it is, it's phenomenal. It's tremendous in a way. It may be cheap, but not cheap in the economic sense, because it's so eventful. It is so melodramatic, and also so eventful. The camera follows them when they go to these big rewards. So you see them in a Beyonce concert, you see them in the NBA finals. It's amazing. You see them in a New York trip. They come from in a private jet from Dominican Republic, where the shooting location, and they went to a New York trip for 2 days, stay at luxury villas and all that stuff. So it's pretty much what is the prominent thing in Turkish television right now I think for the last almost 10 years. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
That's crazy. But the eventness is actually also something that struck me. Obviously, I mean, the Oscar Telecast is always an event, isn't it? But one thing that strikes me about the way the 2021 was positioned is as an event without actually celebrating the way that television does events, because live telecasts is absolutely normal in a television event. When that's true for things like precisely things like the coronation, where you move, or like a wedding where you move between different places and all the time, and then you have a studio, and the studio has in the background a screen and all of that. So do you think that this thing about having Steven Soderbergh, film director, in charge rather than just a straightforward TV director who knows the event television might have been the cause of the problems of the 2021 telecast?
I mean, yeah, the short answer is definitely. I respect Steven Soderbergh greatly, and I think there was a lot of discourse about he's the right choice because he's so creative and he's exactly the person to reinvent this. But I think what Soderbergh ran into was the same thing that every Oscar producer runs into, and I will say it's kind of par for the course now to hire a new set of producers every year. So like Will Packer came in, and then they'll have some new people next year. I mean, the days are kind of gone where they have a sort of stable producing team for the Oscars, unless that changes. I do think he ran into what they all run into, which is that, like, I keep using the metaphor of reinventing the wheel, and every producing team thinks they're going to kind of crack the code to make a better award ceremony, but the wheel is kind of what it is. And they were handed a lot tougher circumstances than most, to give them their due, because just because of COVID, there were so many limitations on having people there. But I do think they tried to turn it from, well, we have to completely change this and make it more TV, more of a global TV event. And they made it into, well, it's a great opportunity to rethink the Oscars, but also we're going to make it more of a movie. And I think that discourse was intentional to kind of reinforce the film, the cinematic elements of it all. And that's very Soderbergh, I think, for sure.
It is, but it's also so pathetic. I'm sorry.
No, I'm happy that you used that word pathetic, because I know Betsy and we've had our fair share of eye rolling when we're reading through these things. But I think it's not just Soderbergh. I think it's honestly the film industry, because when I was doing my more historical research and I found that quote about how, we're still going to do the Oscars in 1953 as a service to the fans, and it's like, this is what the industry needs. It's like, you don't need this. I mean, you're still going to get money. You're still going to be able to, have products. It's just sort of, I think it's hitting on this sort of larger sort of I don't want to say issue, but this larger sort of matter within the American film industry of being so self-important and thinking that they are doing necessary work. And I mean, at the end of the day, we lived for thousands of years without movies. So, oops. And but I think it's the sort of thing where it is just a sort of a little like, let's just take a step back and sort of look at sort of the contextualization of all this. But again, I've been looking at those pictures that have been coming out from the Deep Space Telescope and just sort of completely rethinking sort of the size of the world in sort of the larger galaxy. So I guess I'm really sort of feeling more negative than normal today about how much anything actually really means. But I think Soderbergh and I think the film industry as a whole can just sort of just take a step back and let's just sort of really consider what's going on here.
Do you think that has something to do with a sense of crisis in the industry, particularly in the film industry, because the television industry is obviously producing high-end television drama that is now celebrated as longer movies, or the 13-hour Twin Peaks movie? God knows what. I mean, this discourse has existed for a very long time as well, obviously, since the 70s, apparently, at least. But it strikes me that there's so many film directors, so many film actors willingly going into high-end television drama in the US now. That might be, and on the other hand, you have Hollywood producing dross, a lot of dross. I'm really sorry to say, but it's a bit disappointing at the moment. I'm not going to see any films other than children's film, because why would I? So do you think that's got something to do with that as well?
Yeah. I do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and also I will say, like, I think the Oscar Telecast, which we kind of alluded to in it, the ratings have been going down every year, and part of that is because the nominees, as you mentioned, Hollywood sort of split into high-end blockbusters, which the Oscars traditionally hate, and kind of more esoteric art films, which not enough people watch that they're invested enough to watch the Oscars when it airs. So the Oscar Telecast itself is in a big crisis, and I think you're seeing that a lot of this idea of reinvention is because the Oscars are flailing. I mean, the Academy and ABC are desperately trying to create a show that more people want to watch, and I think that's a big part of it too, for sure.
Interesting. So yeah, I'm wondering if even though it's such a phenomenon, the Survivors, but the fact that it's so built around this one person, if that's a bit like the being John Malkovich moment in a way, where it's all becoming self-referential, which suggests that something is kind of in the process of exploding, is also imploding. Does that make sense?
Yes, of course it makes sense, because the authenticity criticisms also indicate that this is going to somehow collapse, or should reinvent himself somehow, because it's going on for too many years, and this is the exact formula going on for a very long time, especially when the acquisition of TV series happened and they started the ongoing commentary, as I mentioned. But I think this formula is something that is maybe the show is kind of losing its magic, and being so self-referential and being so much there, especially from during the pandemic season. He was there, Acunul Ilıcalı himself was there like 7 days a week, and every episode somehow he appeared on every episode, and I think it was exhausting it was exhausting for the audience. And the social commentary is that he of course situates himself as a success myth, and of course he is like no others. He's so exceptional. Now he takes criticisms like, well, they said that I could not, and that I did, and I will go on. I can't do this kind of attitude. But of course, something is going to collapse, because these criticisms also say that they yearn for the ordinary, yearn for the people that were not YouTube influencers and did not have any ready fan bases, and they say that it kind of lost the magic of the show, which I partly agree, because the voting audience and the voting system, I should mention that there is not a maximum number of SMS voting that you can put on from a certain line. So it's the high intense fandom of some contestants kind of overload the SMS voting system and kind of change the whole winning thing. And so, yeah, I don't know, maybe this much self-referentiality will make the end of the show. I'm not quite sure, but this is a possibility, of course.
Interesting. I'm afraid we've actually totally run out of time. We're already over time. So unless there are any questions, I haven't seen anyone typing anything or anyone raising their hands. I would say let's thank the three papers for four speakers one more time. And just to announce that obviously our next session starts in less than half an hour now, where we're going to find out about experimentation in 19th century period drama. I shall see you later, I hope. Have a good rest of the day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.